Hi, I'm James Schamus, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you the first film in this year's Kit Noir Festival, Anthony Mann's great Border Incident from 1949. The film is what I like to call an unstable text, a hodgepodge of genres and subgenres, as you will see: docudrama, western, noir, police procedural. Film scholar Jonathan Auerbach, who, by the way, joins this year's distinguished panel discussion, has perceptively written about how Border Incident's generic border crossings index the profound and disturbing ways the U.S.-Mexican border is imagined as productive of American modes of subjectivity and subjection. And while the film's producer and studio made sure to wrap what you're about to see with neoliberal assurances that justice prevails, Anthony Mann, with his signature male-centric sadomasochistic violence, make sure you won't be able to unsee the necropolitical regime that underwrites his story. So allow me to share with you some notes on just a few of the creative forces besides Anthony Mann that went into Border Incident's making. We can start with the extraordinary executive, but also screenwriter and playwright, Dorothy Sherry, who had just landed as head of production at MGM, where he set out to prove that even a big studio could make, as he called them, quickies. He took over the project, which had been in development at B-movie studio Eagle Lion, where it was being developed as a kind of sequel to Mann's successful low-budget procedural T-Men. In one sense, the film was a kind of reunion for Dorothy Sherry and Anthony Mann, who both attended Central High School in Newark, New Jersey back in the day. But it wasn't a particularly successful one at the time, and there's a long story there to tell. Sherry, who was known as a liberal for his commitment to social issue films, think High Noon or Crossfire, still leaves a somewhat ambiguous legacy, for he also had a hand in the infamous Waldorf Statement of 1947, which launched in earnest the Hollywood blacklist. In fact, just a couple of years after the making of Border Incident, one of its co-stars, the great Howard Da Silva, went before the House Un-American Activities Committee and refused to name names. He would not be seen on screen again for another decade. Border Incident teamed up Mann again with his great collaborator, cinematographer John Alton, whose work with Mann in low-budget films like T-Men came to stand for the essence of noir visual style. Alton's book, Painting in Light, remains to this day a foundational text for understanding creative Hollywood visual practices. He would go on to win an Academy Award for An American Paris, where he was able to both utilize his famous low-key lighting while also kind of making a parody of it at the same time. Border Incident really develops a different film language. It's not just a purely noir language, as you'll see, but one which then, I think, Mann extended into his later work in the Western. Another contributor, though uncredited, is composer Andre Previn. Previn joined the MGM music department right out of Beverly Hills High School. He landed in Beverly Hills as a refugee from Germany via Paris. And he's an amazing figure in his own right, an accomplished jazz musician as well as classical conductor. He was the lead conductor for a number of orchestras, including for years the London Philharmonic, the Los Angeles Philharmonic. He earned 4 Academy Awards. Screenwriter John C. Higgins was a major collaborator with Mann in this period. He also worked on He Walked by Night, T-Men, Raw Deal, where his gift for taut action and economic storytelling is very much in evidence. So Border Incident's co-stars are George Murphy and Ricardo Montalban. Murphy was known in the 40s primarily as a song and dance man for his work in films such as Broadway Melody of 1940, where he co-starred with Fred Astaire and Eleanor Power, a film co-written, by the way, by none other than Dorothy Sherry. Soon after making Border Incident, Murphy would retire from acting, becoming the president of the Screen Actors Guild and then the Republican senator from California, in a career that very much prefigured Reagan's and Schwarzenegger's. As a senator, he was a major booster of California agriculture, of course, though, as you will shortly see, if I were him, I would have stayed as far away from California produce as possible. That's an in-joke. You'll get it after you see the movie. Ricardo Montalban spent some of his formative years in Los Angeles before returning to Mexico, where he became a big star. The Hollywood studios took notice and started casting him as suave and debonair Latin lover types, but as Border Incident shows, he had a true dramatic action chop to bring to movies, that's for sure. Later generations remember him mainly for his recurring roles in the wildly popular TV series Fantasy Island or the Spy Kids movies. And he also played a major role in working to diversify the Hollywood film industry. In the 1970s, he co-founded the Screen Actors Guild Ethnic Minority Committee, the No Sotros Foundation, and the Golden Eagle Awards. Mann would return to the border regularly during the course of his career. For example, in 1958's Man of the West, starring Gary Cooper, where, to use historian Greg Grandin's phrase, the end of the myth of the frontier would find itself once again at the U.S. southern border. And in 1956, Serenade, truly one of the most insane adaptations in Hollywood history, derived as it was from James Cain's super gritty, hard-boiled novel, and I would also add super gay, which was then transformed into a fluffy Mario Lanza heteronorm musical confection, which I guess is also super gay, but again, that's for a whole other introduction. Lastly, we should recognize the real stars of Mann's film, the 2.5 million Mexican workers who from 1942 to 1964 worked in the United States under the aegis of the so-called Bracero program, and the millions of others, such as the 1.5 million men who in 1954 were swept up, caged, and deported in the U.S. Border Patrol's Operation Wetback. Over 70 years later, Anthony Mann's film speaks directly to their experiences and, sadly, has lost none of its topicality. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the film.